I've been in the Nerf modding community for over 9 years now, so I've seen a lot of stuff happen in that time. And I'm also in like every single major Nerf modding Facebook group. And mixing those two things together has helped me create a list of 5 things I wish Nerf modders would just stop doing. A semi-rant. In no particular order, we start with number 1, looking up random motors on eBay and Amazon, as well as buying RM2s. I don't see this one come up very often now, but it does happen once in a while. During the age of motor scarcity, if you remember that, back when Blades and Ransons and Falcons were like the big names out there, looking up random motors on eBay actually had a purpose if you knew what you were looking for. When I do see these posts happen, the post is usually along the lines of a picture of the Amazon seller with some random 180, and the question, are these any good? Now, the RPMs right off the bat are usually way too high or way too low for our applications, and most of the time the specs lists are super duper vague, with the stall current and the torque not even being there. Yes, the motor you've listed is a 180, and 180s do have a purpose in our hobby, but the one you've listed I highly doubt has the torque needed to actually be useful. And along with the motor probably not being a good one, there's no information on whether the brushes are just metal brushes or carbon brushes, which makes quite a big difference. While all this is going on, people like Foam Blast, Make Test Battle, Monkey Mods, and a few others have given us such a great motor selection to choose from, there's hardly any reason to go looking for some random motors on eBay or Amazon. I understand the appeal of not having to pay as much as you would have to with some motors, but just buy the motors we know that works. However, if you're the type of person who knows what specs make a good motor for the hobby and you're willing to put in some testing to see if it's worth its value, go ahead and go find some random motors on eBay and Amazon. However, if you're the type of person who has to ask others if the motor is good, just stop. The second part of this is buying RM2s. I don't know how RM2s are still a thing, but they are a garbage motor that needs to be left in the past. People still buy them, I'm not entirely sure why, but it needs to stop. Let RM2s disappear into the vast void of, the back of your mind. Let's forget about RM2s and move on from them. Just let them die, please. The second thing I wish modders would stop doing is not knowing how to solder. Back in the day, there were a ton of posts of people asking how to modify different electronic blasters without having to solder them up. And while those posts are pretty dead overall, modders not knowing how to solder certainly isn't. If you don't know how to solder, this is your sign to start learning the skill right now or at your most convenient time. Please don't delay this skill. Not only is it a handy thing to know for applications outside of the hobby, but it is a great gateway into the other side of things, opening up a whole new world of modding capabilities. Yes, it will take some time. Yes, you're gonna mess up. Yes, you need to practice, but it is totally worth it. Start with a cheap soldering iron and get to practicing right now. YouTube has a lot of great videos on the basics of soldering, how to take care of your iron, and how to make sure you're soldering correctly. And there's a lot of people in this hobby that can also help you out with your questions. Now, if you can already solder, I do have 2 things for you. Number 1 is just keep practicing on your motor tab connections and making them as unglobby-like as possible, because I see a lot of pictures of motor tab connections that are just massive. You want them to be small, but still with a solid joint to them. This will prevent things like short circuiting, which is really important in flywheel blasters. The second one is to give your motor tab wires some slack. Lately, there have been a bunch of posts of people saying that the motor tabs have broken off of their motors, and one of the big things that can cause this is not giving your wires proper slack. In between the motors, put a little bit of a U-bend in the wire. That way, when things start really shaking up, the wire has enough flexibility to move around without directly putting the vibrations into your motor tab, causing them to break off, and you having to buy a new motor. The third thing that I wish modders would stop doing is one that has been plaguing groups for a long time. What LiPo works with XYZ motor combination? This is one that I have seen so many times, even with a bunch of videos being put out there going over how to choose the proper LiPo for your motor setup. It's really common. The answer to this question is super easy, and it comes in the form of a math formula. And while I know math isn't fun and totally for nerds, and you're not a nerd, right? This formula is super duper simple. It's milliamp hour divided by 1000 times the C rating. That's it. This formula gives you your total LiPo amperage and will tell you if the motor combination you have will work with the LiPo you are looking at. Let's try it out. We're gonna start with something easy, just to make it easy. Say you have a 2000 milliamp hour LiPo that has a 65C constant rating. If we plug it into the formula, you get 2000 divided by 1000, which is 2, times 65, which is 130. Now say you're using a set of Neo Rhinos. That's 2 Neo Rhinos, and each Rhino has 24 amp stall current. So 2 times 24 is 48. And as you can see, the LiPo has definitely enough power to run your motor combo. That's it, it's that simple. Now there is a little bit of additional information to go over about this because I know it's going to pop up in the comment section because I've been asked about it before via messages. If your build has more than 2 motors, even if they're not all firing off at the same time, you still want to find a LiPo that has more amperage than all of those motors firing off at the same time. So if your build has 5 motors and you're only really using 3 of them, you still want to add up all the stall current for every motor in the build and find a LiPo that can handle all of it at once. This is just kind of a safety thing, and so you know that your LiPo can handle everything in case something bad happens. Another part of this is, will this battery fit in XYZ battery tray? I don't know if there's a database out there for like battery space dimensions, but there really should be because it's kind of important. What's great about this one is sites like Hobby King have a LiPo finder where you input all the things you want in a LiPo and it will try to find the closest thing to that LiPo for you, which is pretty awesome. On the side of the site, under the LiPo section, they have things you can input such as height dimension, length dimension, and width dimension, along with your milliamp hour preferred specs and the C rating, which is pretty cool. So all you really need to do is get yourself a ruler or calipers, find the battery tray dimensions and input that into the site, along with the milliamp hour and C ratings that go with the motor combination that you're using, and Hobby King will basically take care of the rest. Now there are a few things about this to keep in mind. Number one, you want as high of a C rating and or milliamp hour rating as possible that will fit in the size. And when talking about size, you want to keep in mind that the main leads from the LiPo along with the JST little balance connector and the JST balance connector leads all take up space. You want to make sure there's extra room for all those wires so you're not just pushing them in there and bending them and just ruining your LiPo. If you still have questions about your LiPo, it is no problem to ask people, but it's so much better to have your research done already than to just go in asking blindly if this LiPo will work with whatever blaster and whatever motors you have. I personally appreciate when people show that they've done their research, and having all your research done will get you better answers and possibly quicker ones too. Number 4 on the list of things I wish modders would stop doing is using Trustfires and IMRS in most cases. If you have Trustfires, please get rid of them and at least upgrade. If you're using IMRs, don't use them with anything other than stock motors or the blaster part motors that are supposedly for use with IMRs. Don't have too much information on those things yet, so don't quote me on it. Now I know the initial investment into LiPos can be a bit daunting because it can get kind of expensive, with a good charger going for $30 to $40 and all the costs of switching your wires and switches and connectors. And if you don't think you can handle a LiPo because you heard some scary information from someone, number 1, they're probably wrong. 2, I don't think you should be handling IMRs or Trustfires either, because with the motors we have, you are stressing them out so much they might actually pop. Unlike a LiPo, which is made for higher amp draws, which can handle that stuff way more easily. On the other hand, I can think of some uses for IMRs, especially for new players who just want a small boost of power in their blasters, or for those playing in areas that have a lower FPS cap than normal. Those would be all right for IMRs. If you are using Trustfires, please, please, please get rid of them and let's never talk about them again. Before we get into the 5th point, I'd like to thank my $10 tier patrons for their continued support of this channel. Not sure how tired you are of hearing about Patreon, but whatever. I'd like to thank Scott Tomlin, Tabeck, Bings NZ, Foam Blast, and newcomer Jorge Verdon. Thanks to them for their continued support of this channel through Patreon, and if you would like to support the channel outside of watching some YouTube ads, there will be a link in the description where you can go check my Patreon out. But thanks to them, and thanks to you for watching this, let's get into number 5. Number 5 is gatekeeping, and I'm not talking about telling people that overdrawing their IMRs are bad, or that spring stretching is a terrible practice, or that LiPos are a superior battery choice for higher amp drawing motors. I'm talking about real gatekeeping. For those of you who don't know what gatekeeping is, Urban Dictionary puts it pretty well. It is when someone takes it upon themselves to decide who does or does not have access or rights to a community or identity, and in our case, that means your Nerfer status. The kind of gatekeeping that I've seen in the past that I find to be a problem are things like, why would you spend time and money on overhauling a Strife when you can just go buy an FDL, because the FDL does everything your Strife can and more better. So spending your money on a Strife is a complete waste of time when you can just save up and go buy an FDL. Or saying that the way flywheelers play HVZ isn't strategic enough because all they do is rush and dump as many darts as possible. Or the old, oh, you call yourself a Nerfer? I bet you can't name Laramie's first 3 albums. Now that last one is clearly a joke, but gatekeeping is seriously a dumb problem that we still somehow have. Now there are legitimate reasons for gatekeeping, whether it be for safety reasons or for improvement reasons, but we should really all strive to stop one-upping each other or trying to validate someone's modding skills or their reason for being in a group. Overall, it doesn't matter who someone is or where they come from or how new they are to this hobby. Serious gatekeeping is dumb and it drives people away, and I think it's stupid and it should stop. So stop it. Stop it. And those are my current 5 things that I wish modders would stop doing. Now, I might have totally missed something, or maybe you disagree with one of my points, but if you have something you wish modders would stop doing, or you just don't agree with one of the things I said, leave it down in the description and tell me why. Maybe I'll do a follow-up on this video using some of the viewer suggestions down below, or respond to some of the critiques about my points. But for now, hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a great day wherever you are.